In observance of Suicide Prevention Awareness Month, this second video I'm entitling Redemption. Before I go into that, I just wanted to make mention that while my friend's suicide was a trigger for PTSD, it was not the only traumatic experience that led up to my eventual uh, I'll call it a meltdown because it was a lot of yelling and shouting and fighting. Uh, but there's the, as I learned throughout my healing journey, that we could experience several critical incidents, several micro traumas that just keep adding up. And one other thing to note is that no matter what path you take, no matter what career choice, no matter where life leads you, you're going to bring a history with you. And that comes from the time you're born until you enter into some type of career path. So that's just something to note. And then when you get into uh, maybe that career choice or organizational structure that has its own inherent stressors, it just continues to build and build. So anyway, when I last left you all, I talked about how an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper changed my direction, changed my path for the better. One day I was walking by our training board and I noticed a piece of paper on the board saying Introduction to Firefighter Behavioral Health, and it was put on by a psychologist. She was hosting it at a department that was quite a bit away from me, so I wouldn't probably be able to go because of uh, scheduling, my own shift schedule. So I decided, I'm going to call her because for years before that, the 16 years before that, I kept on saying they need to send us to counseling. They need to send us to counseling. And as I said, I didn't listen to my own external and internal voice to take on that responsibility for myself. So I decided to give her a call and we chatted and I explained a little bit about my story. And she said, you've got a lot of trauma built up from your career. I'd like to talk to you about that. So we just discussed a little bit. And then she said, we're starting a new program called Illinois Firefighter Peer Support. I think you would be a good fit. I'm encouraging you to apply. I can send you the application to get the process started. But before that, that was in April of 2014. In March of 2014, she'd asked me to be part of a workshop that she put on for human resources psychology students at a community, not at a community college, but at a university. And it was, for them, it was a 3-day weekend. What she did is brought in a select number of first responders to tell their story to these students. One of the things we had to do was create a lesson plan and give little outline bullet points and send it into her so she knew what we were going to talk about. We only were going to get 15 minutes, and as I told her, I could probably talk for hours and hours on a subject. She said, you only get 15 minutes. So I decided I was going to tell the story of the night that my friend died by suicide. And as I was writing this out, writing the lesson plan, I started feeling this swirling inside of me, like energy was dragging me down. Something that I thought that I put away, set aside after me and my friend spoke at our fire officer training classes started resurfacing. The day of that workshop, I went in there, I started reading. Just had it as a prepared statement. It was easier that way. Not even one sentence in, I started breaking down and crying. And I barely got through it, and I'm wondering, what the heck is wrong with me? Well, this woman said to me as I was walking out, she said, the next training, those 3 days that we're going to have for Illinois Firefighter Peer Support, which was the very first training, she said, it's going to be very difficult. And I said, after this, it's going to be a walk in the park. But I was wrong about that. As I was making my way through the training, what we had to do is learn how to do peer interventions, which would be talking one-on-one, doing group work. Each and every time I was paired with somebody or in a group, I continued to break down. And there were a lot of guys and gals that were in my group that said, we know all about this, Tim. We know about your friend's suicide. That was a big deal in Illinois. So as I was making my way through peer support, got out of it, one of the most difficult things I had to do was we had to present our concept, our little short PowerPoint presentation to our department. I chose to present this at a staff meeting to my fellow lieutenants and the chief and the deputy chief. And I was very nervous, but I made it through it. And one of the things I learned, because after that and before that, actually, I took this woman up on her offer. The second day in the peer training, I said, you know what, I got a problem. I want to take you up on an offer and come and sit down and talk with you. So I entered therapy. And as I learned in there, what you did is not an excuse. The PTSD you have is not an excuse, but it is an explanation. So I presented that to my fellow lieutenants. It was very difficult, but it was something that was necessary for my healing and for healing from all my bad behavior. I took it, I owned it. So the years went by, several years went by as I'm doing the peer support training. I was gifted the opportunity to speak at 2 different conferences, one in Canada and one in San Diego, about my story, as well as to present the idea and concept of Illinois firefighter peer support. How are we doing it differently than other peer groups from across the country? The second one in San Diego, my wife was with me. Judy came, and she never heard the presentation. She did. And I also offered to everybody that I wouldn't have made it this far. I probably would have left the fire service shortly after that my friend's death. But it was Judy's love, devotion to me that kept me going. And as I always say, she's my best friend in the whole wide world, hands down. And to this day, I still have nothing but the highest regard and praise for her and honor for her for sticking by me through all the tough times. Where does redemption come in? Because again, I went through many doing peer interventions. We also have to, by our group rules, to have 10 hours of continuing education and psychological training, whether that's firefighting training or it's just doing things on your own for your own enrichment, but it's a requirement to maintain active status on the team. I became a regional director, but after a while I was getting too many jobs and I had to scale it back. And it was all now in preparation for retirement. So we're fast forwarding now to 2019 before I retired. Well, in the last several years before that, one of my friends, and he was also on that call, he ran the fire service EMS program for our local community college. And he asked me to come in when they did like a stand down for safety. There's 16 life safety initiatives for the fire service and in there, one of them was a topic on mental health and how there needs to be a commitment by organizations to do something a little bit more than we were doing in the past. Because if you remember what I talked about last week, we were not prepared for a suicide like this. We were all reeling. It's understandable. But to put something in place, something in structure, making promises that if somebody needs help, we're going to get them that help. We're going to support them. So my friend asked me to speak. And not only did I do that, I also did Firefighter Cancer Support Network trainings as well. I became an instructor for them. So I did a dual presentation. First presentation was on the cancer prevention, and the second was on the Illinois firefighter peer support and mental health in general. I did it for a few years, and I always used a training video, and I've put it in my blog in the past. I've shared it with you all. Something that was done by Illinois fighter peer support, and I always would lead off with that on my story, and then I would go into for lack of a better term, the nuts and bolts of how peer support works, what we do. It came to my last presentation in February of 2019. And my friend, we were both lieutenants, but we didn't work on the same shift. So he, in between shift change, he pulled me aside and he said, I'm just going to let you know, our friend's daughter is in the fire academy. She's in his class. So now I'm thinking, oh boy, I'm going to have to really be careful about how I present this, because several years before that, one of the other guys who was on the call, the widow asked if he would actually tell the story of what happened to his 3 daughters. Well, this was the youngest one, and at the time, she was 5 years old when he died. So I met with the instructor of the day, and I said, this is what we're going to do. Can we pull her into the office first so I can let her know what's going on, just in case it would be something that would affect her. I'm not sure how much she really remembered surrounding all that when she was 5 years old, but obviously as she grew older, more and more came out about what really happened to him. So I met with her. She gave me a big hug, and we hadn't seen each other in quite some time. And I just said, this is what I'm going to do. And she said, don't worry about me. Do what you need to do. And I said, I never use his name, but I do talk about in detail, and it could be very triggering. So I did that, and then it went off beautifully. She came up afterwards and gave me a hug. And I was also working as a personal trainer on that community college at that time. I saw her the next day when they were going in to do their PT, and she said, that was, very thought-provoking for everybody in class, and we had a discussion about it afterwards. And she invited me to her graduation from the academy, and that came in 2 weeks before I retired. I attended a graduation, and it was my redemption, if you want to call it that, for years of really holding things in, really ignoring the signs that I did have something wrong, really putting it on my department, on other people to take responsibility for my own health and welfare. And we built up, I was the only representative on my department for peer support. A lot of the younger guys came to me for help, and I would put them in the right path, who they needed to talk to. And the goal was to get conversations like that started at the kitchen table, because we always joke around, banter around, talk about, hey, do you got a guy for this, a guy for that? I need a plumber, I need an electrician. We would talk about that, but we always would hold back about our mental health or talking about that. So somebody has since replaced me on my department, and that happened recently, and I couldn't be more thrilled that happened. But I'm going to just leave you with this. This is Suicide Prevention Awareness Month. When you're working with whoever, or it's family members, whatever, if you see that they're not in their norm, sit down with them and start a conversation like this. And I learned this phrase from my eventual supervisor at the gym I worked at, when she said, when I walked in, she says, come in here, my friend, sit down and tell me a story. So that's what I left. That was my parting words to everybody at my retirement party. Get to know the new people. You're not going to be friends, because there's always going to be generational differences throughout the life cycle of whatever organization. It doesn't have to just be the fire department. But get to learn them, observe them, take a look at the big picture. What does it look like they are? What's their norm, their baseline norm, just how they interact every day? And if you see a change or a difference, then Have that conversation. Sit down, my friend, and tell me a story, because you never know where it might lead, what conversation it might lead to. And my final words for this Suicide Prevention Awareness Month is what I learned and what I said on that training video that I made so many years ago is that the echoes of the mind are never going to let you forget. But in the face of adversity, always have the courage to take the high road. Be well and namaste, my friends.